Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much for participating in our webinar on backing up and protecting the data in Microsoft 365. We have a panel of experts from Technology Integration Group. My name is Gan Sharma. I'm their Business Development Executive for the Cloud Business. We also have our Director for Cloud Services, Bob Hall, and joining the two of us from TIG are ThinkON, who specializes in backing up Microsoft 365, and Ryan Narinesingh, who is the district manager for Veeam, which happens to be the leading company in Microsoft 365 data protection worldwide. But our chief panelist is Michael Buckley from Destination Canada. Destination Canada is a user of Microsoft 365 data protection services from ThinkON and Veeam. And they have joined us because our audience, yourselves, are predominantly folk from the federal government of Canada who are using Microsoft 365 or are planning to use Microsoft 365. With that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Hall, my colleague.
Thanks, Gan. Appreciate the introduction there. My name's Bob Hall. As you mentioned, I'm with TIG, been here for about 10 years. I look after the technology side of the Canadian operations, including cloud. Look forward to participating today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Bob. Dean?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dean Hachey. I'm Vice President of Public Sector and Marketplace Sales for ThinkON. Very proud to be here.
Thank you very much, Dean. Ryan?
My name is Ryan Narinesingh. I'm the Area Director for Veeam here in Canada. Pleasure to be here with one of our some of our trusted partners, such as Destination Canada, ThinkON, as well as TIG.
Thank you so very much, Ryan. I turn it over to Michael Buckley of Destination Canada.
I am the Technical Services Officer with Destination Canada, Canadian Tourism Commission. We've been a customer of ThinkON and for about 6 months now, and we've been using Veeam here for longer than I've been with DC. Yeah, I'm happy to help. This has been a great solution.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. And with that, I think we can get into the meat of it. Tell us why you decided to back up Microsoft 365 at all.
Well, you know, we've all heard about the shared responsibility model in terms of information security, but I would go so far as to say that that extends to information protection, in that Microsoft is responsible for security and protection of the data of the cloud, that is, at a high level, the macro level, the overall system, but the customer, and I'm quite certain that it's in their EULA, the customer is responsible for the security and protection of the data in the cloud, their data in the cloud. So given that, I can trust that Microsoft has a disaster recovery plan. I can trust that Microsoft will be able to recover in the event of hardware failure or system downtime, what have you. But if I need to go recover a particular email, or I need to go and recover a particular document from OneDrive or whatever, and I go ask them for help, they're going to direct me to the Exchange recycle bin or the SharePoint recycle bin, and beyond that, it's not their problem. That's my problem. And so simply that alone, we need to be able to protect our data outside of Microsoft's macro solution.
Fantastic. If I can ask a follow-up question to Ryan from Veeam, what does Microsoft actually protect and what does it not protect?
Yeah, no problem, Gan. So Michael's scenario is very common to where we hear from a lot of our customers and prospects about a very similar scenario. Microsoft does have something called a shared responsibility model where they're responsible for the logical data, the infrastructure itself, but you as a user, once you put your data into that infrastructure, you're responsible for it. The best analogy I can provide for that is thinking about you traveling on public transit. Today, if you travel on public transit, if God forbid you're on public transit and the bus gets into an accident or the train gets in an accident, there's a lot of protection around you on that, making sure you get to your destination, making sure you're covered from a lot of different insurance policies across the board. But taking that same scenario, let's say I just lost my toque on public transit, or I lost a book, or there's a lost and found, aka a recycle box that can recover small things really quickly, or you can get those things really quickly, but the likelihood of you getting your stuff out of there is unlikely, and the longer you leave it on the transit, maybe you pass it a couple of days, the less likely you're going to find it. right? And public transit's not responsible for that. Relating that back to Microsoft 365, you're not really protecting against, it has happened, but but Microsoft has a lot of agreements in place for their infrastructure to go down. That's highly unlikely not to happen. But what is likely to happen is, I may make a user error and delete some files. Maybe I have a malicious employee. Maybe there's a security threat. Maybe there's something, most of it's based on policies or internal procedures or user error. Call it what it is. We're all human. That does happen. You're protecting around those things. And it's not the whole infrastructure that you're protecting. It's getting those granular items from the mail items, from SharePoint, from OneDrive that you need to granular recover. If your executive in your organization needs a file or you need something, a key critical email from a customer, knowing that, whether it's 30 days or 3 years from now that you can get that data back is critical for a lot of customers, especially with a lot of requirements out there, such as PIPEDA and CASA requirements and GDPR out there that our federal government organizations have to follow and adhere to as well.
That's fantastic, Ryan. Thank you very much. I want to now take the question back to Michael and ask, once you decided that you needed to back up Microsoft 365, you chose to back it up to the cloud with specific reference to a protected B cloud is what you decided to do. Why did you do that?
Some years ago, I was at a vendor expo, and I was given a bumper sticker from, I think it was EMC, and it said, "Tape sucks, move on." And really, that's what it comes down to. We have an old LTO drive in our server room. We could replace it if we wanted to, but that's not moving forward. Moreover, we have limited bandwidth in our building here, in our office here, and we have locations around the world. So backing up from the cloud on-prem kind of, I don't know, to my way of thinking, it kind of defeats the purpose of being in the cloud in the first place. But backing up to another cloud, it takes away from me the necessity to maintain that tape drive, to buy tapes, to have cleaning tapes, to have somebody like Iron Mountain come and take away those tapes, store them, bring them back, and you have, what happens if the tape fails? I mean, I'm sure we've never had that happen. I've seen tapes that were reused so often you could see through them. And all of these sorts of things, backing up on-prem is fine, I guess, but if you don't have to, why would you? In terms of protected B, Destination Canada is a little bit different than a lot of the other crown corporations. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of personally identifiable information, so we don't necessarily have to back up to protected B. However, going to our legal department and our procurement department and the other C-suite, we say, hey, look, we're backing up from the Microsoft Protected B certified 365 cloud to a Canadian company that's also Protected B, that has been vetted by Shared Services Canada, that's been okayed by CSE, that's, all of these check marks have already been ticked, so I don't have to go and do that. All of those questions are already answered. It just makes it a simpler process for us to procure that service.
That's great, Michael. And Dean, if I could invite you to answer the question of why is it a good idea to back up to the ThinkON Protected B cloud when it comes to Microsoft 365?
Yeah, most certainly. Thank you, Gan and Michael and Ryan. For your comments so far. Yes, as mentioned, ThinkON is a Canadian cloud service provider, and we happen to be the only cloud service provider on the Shared Services Framework Agreement for Protected B data. So we've been working hard, aligning with federal initiatives around cloud first, and some of the first products we put into that cloud here in Canada are Veeam based because of our partnership with Veeam as a platinum partner. Furthermore, we're one of very few Veeam on the Veeam Advisory Council. So our executives meet semi-annual with Veeam to make sure that we're very tightly aligned with that industry leader and that our services are mimicking Veeam's strategy. So for us, on the Protected B side, we've deployed our infrastructure in a dedicated cloud environment in 3 data centers across Canada, Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary. In fact, we're the only one that has a presence in Western Canada. Probably was one of the check marks for Michael over time as well. But so that makes us certainly unique. Furthermore, we've developed in-house and deployed a portal that sits in front of M365 Backup, the product we're talking about, to provide even more utility from an administrative and an end user standpoint. We basically provide one pane of glass to manage restores from your mail environment, your SharePoint environment, and basically all the environments that M365 protects. It's a really simple console that people like Michael can use as an administrator to manage access and ultimately the functionality of this really beautiful product. The federal government clearly is moving in the direction of M365, and for good reason. It's a tremendous platform managed by a tremendous company, Microsoft. And Microsoft does have responsibility for geo-redundancy and availability of that service. And what they don't have is responsibility for your data. Ultimately, that's you, and rightfully so. And the granularity with which you can gain access to that data to provide restores regardless of when you left your hat on the train, and I like that analogy, Ryan, is extremely important in a world where data is being retained for longer, for many, many more reasons, for reasons we haven't even imagined yet. So it's an honor to be Canada's cloud, and it's an honor to be protecting Canada's data, and to be working with great customers like Destination Canada.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much, Dean. Can I now turn to Bob?
I really like the way that Michael laid it out, which is, Microsoft has a requirement to be able to recover to a point in time, meaning if it blows up right now, they can get you back to where you were right now, which is great. But where the problem really lies is in the fact that, in the real world, we need to be able to recover anything at any moment. And retention terms, how long we're going to keep that data for, that's really important. And by using a tool like Veeam provides through ThinkON, we're able to manually choose what we want. Finance departments probably have 7-year retention rates, right? You look at organizations that deal with legal documents or around their customers, that retention period could be a lot longer. We have one customer that we're working with right now, deals with youth and children, and they're required to keep every email, every document, everything for 101 years from the date of the kid's birth, right? So when you think about that, currently they have huge file folders for every child that they've dealt with, and some of these kids are in the system for years, right? And they're backing stuff up to tape. Now they've moved over to the cloud. They have to be able to have a tool that can do that. And the great thing about leveraging Veeam is that you can do that. And what really surprises me in the time that we've been doing this, and we've been working with Veeam for 9 years since I've been with the company, and with ThinkON since inception. And every time that I go in and meet with customers, they always forget about retention rates, right? They're here about, I need to back up today so that if I have a failure today, I can recover. But they don't think about the fact that, if you get audited, you might need to pull records from 7 years ago from a finance database. And how are you going to do that, right? It's often overlooked. And the biggest challenge is when they're using tape, right? Like Michael said, he's seen tapes that are, almost clear they've been reused so many times. I walked into one company where, we were working with them, and they said, okay, well, yeah, we have backups from 10 years. And we went and we looked, and, the backup administrator didn't have anything properly configured, and their tapes were blank. So they thought they were protected, and they weren't. With Veeam, not only can you back it up, but you can validate it, right? And with it being in ThinkON, you got different layers of disk that you can use so that you can manage your costs, right? And that's the one thing I really like to bring home to customers.
Fantastic. Bob, thanks for bringing all that together. So if I can now move on to the subject matter of best practices. Michael, I have a question for you. So when you implemented this, what were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of planning for and implementing a backup solution for Microsoft 365?
So we already had Veeam in place, and as a stopgap between when we went live with 365 and when we went live with ThinkON, we were actually backing up Microsoft 365 to our on-prem SAN. And I think in my head, the only change that came about was that we would just take our existing backups and point them to ThinkON's cloud instead of ours. That's not quite how it works. We did that with our on-prem backups that are also going to ThinkON's cloud, but for 365, they actually back it up directly for us and manage that on our behalf. So that, again, that's something else I don't have to deal with. So I had to tell them, okay, which mailboxes do I want to back up? Which SharePoint sites do I want to back up? Again, my old style backup to tape with backup exec type backup solution brain goes, well, just back up all the mailboxes. Duh, come on. But that's not how it works. If you do that, then you're going to end up with all of the abuse mailboxes and the spam quarantines and all of those sorts of non-user mailboxes, and the mailboxes that get created when you're using Microsoft Teams that go along with the SharePoint sites that get created with Teams, all of that stuff automatically. And so that was causing a bit of a problem, simply because maybe, again, I wasn't processing this correctly out of the gate. But I will say that ThinkOn's support team did a great job of getting me on the right path. And, we had that sorted out in short order, and it's been kind of set and forget since then. We add users to our ThinkOn backup group when they come, and we take them out when they go, and that's that.
So that's fantastic, Michael. Ryan, would you like to add to that?
Well, I would say that, the way Veeam was designed is we're a software solution where we made it a goal and intentionally did not create a repository. We work with a lot of leading vendors and technology partners who have expertise with their own repositories like ThinkOn for Protected B, or manufacturers out there. We made it intentional to do that, where some other solutions have kind of combined the storage location as well as their solution in one. And fundamentally, that's a little bit against our practice. The reason being is when we look at backup, we try to adhere to a rule called 3-2-1. 3 copies of data, 2 different types of media, and 1 offsite. That fundamental policy allows you to keep redundancy, not in one, essentially not putting all your eggs in one basket, to ensure that your data will be in uptime and readily available. And part of the consideration is, as Michael was alluding to, it was kind of put together from a nice package by TIG. But fundamentally, you need to consider: am I putting all my eggs in one basket, all in Microsoft's platform? Do I want to trust that? Do I want to diversify that to make sure that if one place goes down, can I get it from another place? So that's one of the major considerations, I would say. And in this scenario, especially for federal government customers in Canada, with of a lot of our policies and procedures to protect our Canadian data, the Protected B environment helps with that. The second thing I also want to remind people is just to kind of harp on the point of why you need this data. You're like, well, maybe I don't, I don't get into the business of recovering mailboxes. Maybe I don't want to get into that business with my employees or staff that recover mailbox by mailbox. It's not always just a granular, just recover a mailbox. It might come down to a legal scenario. We have one of our federal government customers, which I won't name for obvious reasons, had a malicious employee delete a lot of their emails, put it in their mailbox, and clean their mailbox. Now, typically within Microsoft policy, you can recover that within 30 or 60 days. But the problem is for the government to figure out what actually happened, investigate that problem, and find that it took over 140 days to find that resolution for it. Then they went through the process of recovering that data. And by that time, the data was not able to be found. That's what you're looking for protecting, why you're protecting this data. It's not just, yes, it's handy to recover data, but let's think of worst case scenarios where, some of the data got leaked, a malicious employee, user error. Most times to navigate and backtrack to find that problem takes longer than 140 days. And then, but most times the data is gone. So just to leave you with 2 things of, you're not just protecting just around self-user report, you're protecting around the legal requirements of your government. That should help you with making the business case to the executives within your department or organization. And then number 2 is that don't put all your eggs in basket. Veeam is a company who specializes in backup, specialize in the 3-2-1 rule, and you should think about that when you're evaluating how you're crafting your solution for this. And like I said, TIG has done a great job of keeping that balance there of diversifying to make sure your data is fully protected.
That's just absolutely fantastic, Ryan. Can I ask a question to both of you, Dean and Bob, what they should bear in mind in terms of best practices when it comes to protecting Microsoft 365 data?
From our perspective as a service provider hosting this important backup and recovery service, we deal with a lot of customers, big and small, public and private sector. But if essentially the requirements and the problems they're trying to solve are very similar. There are use cases, when you get into secret clearance and the handling of data and whatnot, that you get into other best practices altogether. We also, take care of that. So for us, the onboarding process and engaging with a department or a customer looking to deploy the service, it's really about an understanding of the level of recovery and granularity that's required, and the frequency with which these services may need to be taken advantage of. There are really kind of 6 core issues that are resolved or need to be considered as best practices when you're looking at deploying the service, right? So there's the accidental deletion, right? And that's a probability that's going to happen, right? So there are ways to configure this service such that, even with things like forever retention on the back end, which is one of the options, there isn't really a scenario you can't recover from, even with an accidental deletion. Retention policy gaps and confusion. We talked about retention policies. Bob mentioned that that's often overlooked. The ability for the administrator of this service to set, department or group level retention policies is very much interactive tool set within this advanced backup and recovery service. So there are best practices that our onboarding team would be conversationally having with every one of our customers as we onboard them. The other area to look at best practices is to mitigate against internal security threats associated with access to the tool set. And there are things that can be done to configure on the authentication and security side about getting access to this service that need to be considered. External security threats, and I can keep going. Also, there was, I think, Ryan, you mentioned legal and compliance requirements. That's a huge one. To be able to recover beyond what's typically, I think you said 140 days. I was going to say that as well. There's studies out there that basically say by the time individuals are aware that there's been a loss of data, it's typically around 140 days. And that by far exceeds the standard backup and recovery policies of the platform itself. Right, so that's a big one. Finally, sort of the migration of the service. You might be migrating from a traditional Microsoft Mail environment to this service at this time while deploying backup. So there's best practices in that regard that we also specialize in, but also sort of hybrid 3-2-1 type scenarios as to how you make sure you have the redundancy in your data and recoverability of your data. I went on for a little bit there, but I wanted to convey the breadth of the experience we have out of our bilingual Canadian support organization that is secret cleared to support federal government workload. Sorry, Bob. Hopefully I left something for you.
Yeah, Dean, you had a lot of great points there. Everything that we look for in our customers. The very first question that I always ask is, when you guys are backing up now, where are your tapes? Well, they're in Iron Mountain. They're in a place over here. When you back up, you want to make sure that your data stays in Canada, right? And ThinkON is one of the very few providers out there who offers this service and can guarantee that backup data stays in Canada. And that's, for the federal government, for the provincial government, that's the second most important concern for Canadians, right? And so that piece, along with everything that, we've talked about in the last, half hour or so for best practices, that makes the perfect solution.
That's just fantastic. And so I move on to what I would regard as the final question. Michael, can you help our peers understand how you worked with SSC to acquire a cloud backup solution?
Destination Canada is a Schedule 3 Crown Corporation, so we're not beholden to use Shared Service Canada services if we don't want to. We certainly have the ability to leverage that if it makes sense for us. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But we still have to abide by standard procurement policies, right? The $10,000, $25,000 limits, those sorts of things, contracts, RFPs, all of that sort of good stuff. When we first started on this trek, I went to our Veeam rep and said, hey, so we want to start backing up to the cloud. I know that you guys do that or have partners that do that. Can you put me in touch with somebody? ThinkON was not their first choice, unfortunately, but they put us in touch with another Canadian company. It was I know, right? And we had a great conversation. They were great, but they were not on a roster or supply arrangement or a standing offer. So we would have gotten a year or two, and then we would have had to go to RFP, and then potentially had to switch backup providers again. Continued looking around, and sure enough, if you look at the cloud brokers group within SSC, they list Microsoft, Amazon, and ThinkON. Oh, okay. So you look around at ThinkON, and sure enough, they're a Veeam provider. So I got in contact with them through their website. As I understand, we were kind of first to the gate on that one. We were ahead of the cloud service brokers updating all of their stuff so that we could pick ThinkON as a provider through their portal. So we had to go through the old-fashioned way with paperwork. But, again, ThinkON was on top of all of this. So we went to them and said, we're a Crown Corporation. We got in touch with Dean and Ken, said, hey, this is what we need. They came back to us with a quote. There's no messing around with that. And then they helped us through the rest of the process. Again, a little bit different because we're not going to the cloud services broker group because they weren't ready for us to do that yet. ThinkON was able to push that through on their end, got the contract signed, and, we had our storage within a couple of days after that, and we were backing up within a week after that. In that regard, it was pretty smooth, and thanks to Dean for his expertise getting that pushed through.
Let me take that answer and punt it over to you, Dean.
Hey, thanks, Gan, and thanks again for choosing us, Michael. The reality is ThinkON's been investing in the relationship with the federal government's, in particular, Shared Services and Treasury Board around their cloud-first mandate for the better part of 3 years. And really, that's a journey we've been on, and it's been a good one. We made investments to improve our business, to have the ISO certifications, the SOC certifications, the CSC and cyber clearances, certifying 3 of our data centers, and most of our employees are secret cleared. And we've really built a business in order to have a viable alternative in Canada for this type of workload. So I don't want to make this into a commercial, but I'm pretty proud of our company and being able to achieve this and being able to offer services like Veeam, the M365 backup product. Now, the procurement process itself, I've been selling into and around government for most of my 35-year career. What Shared Services and Treasury Board has built here around this framework agreement for protected B workload is probably the cleanest, most simple procurement process that I've seen. Okay, and as a result, and by the nature of the fact there's an order in council that extends this framework agreement to the broader public sector, all public sector can take advantage of these cleared applications that are available out of Canadian data centers to serve the broader public sector. In a world where data standards, security standards, data residency and sovereignty, and these types of things are becoming more and more prevalent. I think the timing is great for these types of standards to be put in place and be made broadly available without procurement complexity. So, Michael was early. Michael put his hand up, before Shared Services was ready to extend the contract outside of the 43 federal departments. And we broke new ground with Michael. And working with the cloud brokering team at Shared Services, which is a wonderful group of people that's trying to make this cloud-first edict work. So long and short of it, in about a week, we're launching something called gcloud.ca, which will actually be a portal of our marketplace of these types of services, which will include this offering. And it'll be accessible to the broader public sector. So you can go and take a look at it. You can establish a price for it. You can start the process of filling out what is a simple 3-page cloud request form that ultimately goes through an approvals process to make sure you are in fact buying a protected B certified service from one of the approved cloud providers. And keep calm and think on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Can I finally now turn to sort of as the last step here to turn to Bob, and how do we take this to next steps?
We've been working with ThinkON and Veeam, putting together a strategy on how to, help customers move from what they're doing today to a more cloud-based environment. And it seems like a very large step in what you're going to do, right? When you're going from everything's in-house to suddenly stuff's out in the cloud, what's the security around that, all the pieces? The thing that I find really does highlight the solution for, backing up 365 into the cloud is that it's a very, very easy process. It's very straightforward if you plan it out properly. So what we need to do is sit down with them, go through and understand, as we've talked about, what are your retention rates? What are the different groups whose mailboxes are out in the cloud? Who needs to have backups? Who doesn't need to have backups? There are organizations where there's people out there who have mail where 30 days worth of retention is plenty, right? So you don't need to back up those mailboxes. So we go through a process of evaluating all of that, getting it in place. Then we work with Ryan's team and we decide, from that perspective, what's the right approach to for Veeam to be able to back up that stuff. And then Dean's group gets involved and says, okay, for the 8 trillion terabytes of storage that we're going to need here, this is, how we can lay it out. Some's going to be on, expensive tier because we need to get it quick. Some might be on less expensive tier because it's just, long-term, as I mentioned, Boys and Girls Club kind of stuff. where the data is there and it might never be looked at again. So making sure that we plan out that strategy on how to get you into that backup is really the first thing that we need to do, and that's how we normally start the process with our customers. And you know, on a totally related but not the same note, even just thinking about backing up your entire environment into the cloud, when you're leveraging Veeam and ThinkON, it's a 2-click solution. We put in the username and the password, add it into Veeam, and you know, within a few minutes you're backing that entire environment. So you can not just only back up your mail solution, your Office solution, but you can back up your infrastructure, and then you have the total protection suite in Canada where you want it.
Been there, done that. It was that easy.
See, thank you very much, Michael. And I think that this panel here represents significant value to the federal government. I'm very proud to be part of it, and I thank everybody here for their participation today.